Hello, students. I know this is a trying time for everyone. I know everyone is still sort of trying to get their feet underneath them as we move completely online. But this will be the first of our video lectures throughout the semester. I'm hoping to always have at least two of these per week for you to cover the material that we would have talked about in class. So, in this PowerPoint, which has been available on Blackboard, here is the end of the film of Jaws. We basically didn't see in class the last 10 minutes. I was hoping on Thursday that we would have been able to see them, but such is not to be. Anyway, on this section of the PowerPoint, you will see how Quint dies. You will see how Hooper tries to stop the shark with his science, although Hooper does survive. And then you will see how Brody saves the day, killing the shark, and then the end of the film as Hooper and Brody swim away. You can watch all three of these on YouTube. Just as a reminder of our narrative structure, our three-act formula, Act 1, setup, Act 2, conflict and obstacles, Act 3, resolution. In your paper, as you write the paper, please try and use these terms when you're talking about the scenes you're going to use in your evidence. So, for example, you could use Act 2 to describe the scene where Hooper and Brody are trying to tell the mayor that the proportions of the shark on the billboard that has been vandalized are proportionally correct. So you could say, in Act 2 of the film, Hooper and Brody confront Mayor Vaughn by pointing to a billboard that has been vandalized with a giant shark fin. Hooper points to the sign and warns the mayor by stating the fin's proportions are correct. Just as a reminder of our major characters in Jaws, for your paper, I would choose to write about any of the characters over here. I think you could fulfill the terms of the assignment by writing about any of these four characters, as they have clearly defined desires, they have clearly defined goals, and of course, the shark is the antagonist to those goals. So if you're writing your paper or would like to rewrite some of your paper before you submit it, I would choose any of these four characters. Right. Just remember that the goal of paper 2 is to talk about how the shark in the film fulfills the role of the antagonist. And the antagonist, of course, is the person or force that stops the protagonist. The antagonist is not just a bad guy. The antagonist can be an opposing force. And in Jaws, of course, the shark is the antagonist. There he is again. So let's look at the goals of Mayor Vaughn. Let me move this so you'll be able to see some of what I have posted down below. All right. Mayor Larry Vaughn, played by actor Murray Hamilton, is an important side character in the film Jaws. He is not the antagonist, that is the shark, but he is definitely not a sympathetic character. He's probably the closest we could all come to saying is a bad guy in the film in terms of his motives. And it's important to remember that his motives are purely financial based. He's there so that the business owners can make money during the summer months. He's not so worried about the health and safety of Amity Island. All right? His care is only about how the shark represents an antagonist to his goals to make sure the community maintains money. In the two screen caps posted below, we can see those goals being enacted. Here, if you remember, he is telling someone to please get in the water. And then on the other one, he's being interviewed. And in the interview, he's telling everyone and the TV that the shark has been caught and the beaches are open. So what we have here is a perfect example of him ignoring the safety of his community solely so that he can earn money. Now let's go on to Hooper. Matt Hooper, played by actor Richard Dreyfuss, wants to help Amity stay safe, but also wants to learn and document the shark. Hooper's goals in the film are a bit more complex than the mayor's, and maybe even more complex than Chief Brody's. in that Hooper obviously wants to make sure people are safe from the shark and does a lot of work with Chief Brody to maintain their safety. But Hooper is also a bit of a smartass. All right. The shark is an antagonist to Hooper because it represents something he doesn't know and that he is often wrong about. All of his attempts to use science to understand the shark and stop the shark fail. Like eventually he can't succeed just using his sort of intelligence and his knowledge. In the two scenes below, we have the scene where Hooper kind of acts like a smartass to tell the people that the first fish they caught was not the shark, right? As he says, examining the bite radius. Another example of Hooper's attempt to study the shark is this sort of humorous scene pictured here, where as Quint is trying to load up the gun and Chief Brody is freaking out about seeing the shark, Hooper just wants Brody to go out onto this sort of crow's nest area here so that he could have perspective to take a photo. He's trying to document the shark for science instead of stopping it. So we can kind of see that Hooper has sort of two main goals, which is to stop the shark, but also to understand and master the shark through his knowledge. And those, of course, fail. If you watch the scene linked to at the beginning of this PowerPoint, you see Hooper get into a shark cage and try and use his new science of studying sharks, and the shark completely demolishes the cage and almost kills him. Next up, we have Quint. Sam Quint, referred to as Quint by most of the characters in the movie, played by actor Robert Shaw, initially seems to want to kill the shark only for money. For much of the first two acts of the film, Quint is basically a background character. We see him make the speech pictured below in this PowerPoint slide, and we see him kind of laugh when they think they caught the shark, but they really didn't. He's basically in the background until probably towards the end of the second act. For much of the first act of the film, he is completely absent. So pictured below is what we feel and what we are introduced as the audience as Quint's initial motives. That he is there to kill the shark solely for money. As he says, he will catch him for $3, but he will kill him for $10,000. But towards the end of the second act, however, Quint reveals a deeper motivation to kill the shark. The shark is an antagonist to Quint because he is a survivor of the USS Indianapolis. The USS Indianapolis was a true event and the largest single shark attack in history. Around 150 sailors are thought to have died due to sharks. Here's a photo of the actual boat. So, in the U.S. Indianapolis scene, where all three of the characters are kind of having a bit of camaraderie, sitting around drinking, sharing old battle scars, we have the U.S. Indianapolis scene, which is the most famous monologue in Jaws, and one of the more famous monologues in all of cinema history, one could argue. The U.S. Indianapolis scene outlines that the goal of Quint is not only money, but to have revenge on the shark for the attacks he suffered as a survivor of the U.S. Indianapolis. So this scene gives us our real motivation for Quint, which is he wants to kill the shark as revenge. And here are some of the more famous clips from that scene. Provided on this slide is a link to the full speech. So if you choose to write about Quint, there's a link to the full speech. Over here is a quote that has been edited to hit some of the more famous and important parts where he outlines his desire for revenge. He even mentions he had a close friend who a shark killed. Right? So the shark to Quint represents to him the death of his friends and his fellow sailors. His quest for revenge, of course, fails. You can watch the scene at the beginning of this PowerPoint where Quint gets eaten, essentially. So Quint suffers the same fate as his fellow sailors. He didn't escape the fate of the U.S. Indianapolis. He only kind of extended it for years. Finally, we have Chief Brody. Chief Brody is our protagonist and protector. The protagonist, Chief Brody, played by actor Roy Scheider, his goal is to protect the town of Amity, including his family members. Now, I think it's important to note that Chief Brody doesn't just want to protect his family members. He wants to protect everyone in the community. It's also good to note that he is scared of the water and not a good swimmer. He moved from New York to Amity because, as he says, to make a difference. And he is the only character that really succeeds at defeating the shark and achieving his goal of protecting the community. So let's look at some evidence about Chief Brody. Chief Brody. During Act 2, Brody tells Hooper his motivations for moving to Amity, even though he's scared of water and wouldn't like to live on an island. I'm telling you, the crime rate in New York will kill you. There's so many problems, you never feel like you're accomplishing anything. But in Amity, one man can make a difference. In 25 years, there's never been a shooting or murder in this town. Right? And if you look at the scene, the screen caps pictured below, especially the one on the right, you can see how he's pointing at Hooper to make his point. Of course, he's drunk because he doesn't want to get on the boat in the water. But this gives you a real glimpse into the intentions and motivations of Chief Brody. He's somebody who wants to make a difference. He's somebody that can protect and keep people safe. And in New York, he felt like he could not do that. But here in Amity, he feels like one man, mainly himself, can make a real difference to the community. So the shark, obviously, represents an extreme danger to this community. In many ways, Chief Brody is the moral compass of the film. His motivations are pure. He wants to keep everyone safe and is willing to risk himself to do so. He's not like Hooper, who does want to help people, but Hooper also wants to understand and master the shark with his knowledge. Chief Brody has nothing really against the shark, except that it is a danger to the community, and so therefore he must protect it. An important detail that reflects this is how, if you watch the movie, Chief Brody never wears a gun until the final confrontations with the shark. The screen capture pictured below is the scene of him putting on his holster with his 6-shooter on it. It's also important to remember, if you watch the scene, this is the same gun that eventually does end up killing the shark. So, he's putting on the way that will finally defeat the shark. So now the shark. The shark is, of course, the antagonist to all of the goals of the main characters. The shark is the opposing force to each of their desires. Mayor Vaughn wants to have a financially successful summer. Hooper wants to understand scientifically the shark. Quint wants revenge on the shark for his past, and Brody just wants to help protect the people of Amity. And the shark represents an opposing force to all of these goals. So this is a brief breakdown of how the shark represents an antagonist and how all the different characters have different motivating goals that the shark comes up against. In the next PowerPoint, we will discuss more specifically how you could write about this in critical review number 2.